This is a video I have been very excited to put together. I found the results to be very interesting and I think you will as well. So in this video, we're gonna pit Neural DSP versus Mesa versus Two Notes and see which one sounds best. Let's go. First, before we get into it, just a couple disclaimers out of the way. No, none of these companies have either paid for the video or sent me the equipment for free. I went through quite a little bit of a journey trying to figure out what setup was going to work best for me, being that my primary way of making my living is teaching virtual guitar lessons. So I'd actually bought the Mesa Boogie head and the Two Notes and was planning on using that for the virtual lessons. It was not going well, and then that's what made me end up buying a quad Cortex, and along the way I had the Mesa plugins and all this kind of good stuff that I've used for my productions. So before I turned around and sold all the equipment, I figured, hey, you know, it'd be kind of cool to just do a full shootout, right? Whole production process, and see which thing sounded best in the context of the mix. So that's a little disclaimer and background of that. Let's talk about my sort of work flow and methodology here. So what I decided to do to keep it vaguely scientific and as apples to apples as I possibly could was I took my Mesa Mark V 25 head, pairing that with my vertical 2x12 Mesa cab that had vintage Celestion 30s in it, and decided that I had a couple mics that were pretty close to what was in either what Neural DSP had or Two Notes, which was a Sennheiser E906 mic and an Royer R10 ribbon mic. So my decision was, okay, that's what I've got in the real world. I'm gonna try to match that everything in the virtual world. So I specifically used a 2x12 cab in both the Neural and Two Notes. No, it was not vertical, those were horizontal, so I know they're not exactly the same. And the mics were not exactly the same either, but they were, in my opinion, based on essentially the same models. The ribbon mic being the more expensive Royer essentially, and the dynamic mic I think pretty much being just the same one. I decided to use an old project file that I had done for a Jericho baritone guitar review, so I'll do the little yada yada if you want to see the review on that guitar. Thing was killer, and I managed to get it for super cheap. Highly recommended on the used market. The Jericho stuff used is absolutely like one of the best deals out there. So I used that project file. Yes, the video clips were from the previous one, so it is me miming along, but whatever. I used my DI tracks that I had created when I made the original review. So the performances are quite literally exactly the same. They're all essentially reamped. I also had used the Neural DSP Gojira plugin with some special effects. So for each one I reamped, I kept all of those special effects. If I was using an overdrive pedal from the Mesa Neural plugin, I kept it as I did the different combinations. So basically all of the pre-effects going into the amp or potentially post-effects after the amp are all the same. The only thing that is changing is the head and the amp speaker combos in there. So our different combinations are all Neural DSP, all Mesa Boogie, the Mesa Boogie Mark V 25 in the C+ mode going through the Neural cab, and then that Mesa head, the Mark V 25 C+ going through the Two Notes cab sim. So those are all of our different options here to compare and contrast. When I dialed in the Mark V 25, I did my best to get it set the exact same way that I had in the Neural plugin. So basically what I did was I started by mixing in the Neural plugin, found the mic placements that I thought were best there, the head settings that I thought were the best, and then basically copied everything as I went, tried to get get the mic placements exactly the same in real life and as close as I could get it in the Two Notes, because obviously that is, I'm sure as everyone knows, one of the biggest ways of changing the way a guitar amp sounds. So that's the process here and how I put the whole thing together. So with all that out of the way, you've already seen from the beginning A being through the different versions of the lead guitars. Now let's take a look at just focusing on the rhythm guitars. Now we'll do an A-B of a little bit more of a textural lead thing over top of some rhythm guitars with a whole lot of strings. Let's go. Now let's jump over to my project file, get a little bit in the weeds, and take a look at what all of the different combinations sounded like both pre and post processing. Okay, welcome to my project file. Just to explain to you a little bit what we're looking at. Each one of these banks right here is the different combinations that we put together. So the Neural is obviously all Neural. The cab is the head in the cab. Two Notes is the head into the Two Notes Captor X with their cab. And then the head is going to be the head into the Neural DSP cab. What I did was I bypassed all my processing on the rhythm and lead guitars, and anything that was double tracked has been bounced down into one stereo file just to make things easier from like a mixing standpoint. And also I copy and pasted over all of my automation here as well, and level matched everything basically as good as I could. So the mixes that you were hearing, all of the little moves or like a delay throw or something that would happen maybe on like a lead, all of that was happening. Like I said, if there was some sort of an effect that was put in front of it, I reamped with that. So in this case, what I decided when I was doing like the rhythm guitar part was I really liked how Drive 1 sounded in front of it. So when I reamped, I had this on going into the head to try to keep things, again, as consistent as possible. Again, I picked the 2x12 cab with mics that basically match what I got, right? So 409 to me is looks like a 906, right? I don't know. It looks like a Sennheiser. And then this looks like my Rohrer R10. It's the much more expensive one that I don't have. So I know it's not exactly apples to apples, but it's also not like complete like garbage of a test. I think there's some real interesting results that happen here. So what I thought we would do is really just focus on each one on their own in isolation. We've heard it in the context of the whole mix, which I do think is very important, but now let's just hear it without the processing and then with it. So this is going to be the Neural DSP plugin with no processing. Now to the cab. Two Notes. And now the head into Neural. And one more time, I'll jump through a little bit quicker this time. So the Neural. I find it to be really interesting. Those don't sound the same at all. Like they're just not even close. And one of my least favorite ones, well, the least favorite I think is Two Notes, kind of just all day long. I don't like the way that sounded. And I think that the head into the actual Neural cab, I don't like either. But once I processed it, this became my favorite. And I think that's an interesting kind of thing with all of this. None of these tones are, quote unquote, mix ready. They all need processing in order to get them to actually sit in the mix. So as with all of it, high and low pass filtering is going to be your like bread and butter. You basically want to trim some amount of the low end rumble away, and you want to trim some amount of the top end fizz away. And how much you do that, it really is kind of personal taste, honestly. Usually I like to do my high cut a little more aggressively than maybe other people do. So in this case, I'm all the way down to 5. I am using the Iosis Air EQ, which is one of my favorite EQs. This is a little bit more of a, how do I put it? Like, it's just not as extreme of an EQ, right? So like I could dial up the strength and the character and make it more intense of an effect, but I like the way that the cues don't get as tight as other potential plugins. Cues are a little bit wider, and that the intensity is a little bit less. So that's why I really like it. So enough blabbing. Let's take a listen to this engaged with just the high and low pass. So start with off, and this is just the Neural. And off. Automatically, that's a big improvement. It's already making it more mix ready, but it is not there yet. That's where these two cuts come in. As with everything, there's going to be these resonant whistles that you want to remove, but you don't want to remove too many. When you get doing this cutting thing, you can definitely go overboard. So now, keeping the high and low pass on, here's with those cuts. Turn them off. This cut down here especially is like, wow, that does a ton. So I kind of describe it as like, man, it's like the clouds parted, and like we can actually hear the tone for what it was the whole time. So that is a big deal. That really makes a huge difference. So let's skip over to the cab and take a look at that one. Now I'll turn on the high and low pass. Then those sharp cuts. Yeah, when you go back to the unprocessed, right, like that's not even close to mix ready, which is fine, right? That's what processing is, and that's what mixing is. It's about like, taking all that and trimming it so that it fits in the context of a mix. So now let's just A/B, just my EQ move, nothing else going on there between the Neural. Let's actually get them all involved just to kind of speed this up a little bit. And all of those cuts were the same, by the way. So not in the exact same place. Whoops, wrong thing. Not all cut in the exact same place, but the same approach, right? I limit myself to 2 sharp cuts and then just a high and a low pass on this particular rhythm guitar. I didn't feel like I needed anything, over in here. It's basically just trim the fat from the top and the bottom and deal with those resonant frequencies where they're at. So now let's go through and just hear what all of those sound like. So with the Neural first. Cab. Two Notes. Right, it's already a massive improvement, no doubt about it. We'll go backwards. Now, what's interesting to me about this is I found the tone of the cab, this captured the way the amp sounded in person. Like, it sounded huge and aggressive and just like nasty in person. And I felt like it came across when I was reamping, but then when it came to putting it together in the full context of the mix, I was a little disappointed with how the rhythm and lead guitar really kind of turned out. The double-tracked thing in the very beginning with that octave effect was cool. The kind of gritty, clean effect, that tappy thing, I thought that was cool too. The two notes I just think is laughably bad. Let's actually just do quick oops, sorry, keep clicking on the wrong thing. We'll do this EQ off and just take a look at this. I mean, it doesn't sound good. Actual cab. So, I mean, just in my opinion, the two notes just does not sound good. And like, even with the EQ, like, just nothing helps that. It just does not sound like a good sample. I don't know how else to put it. It just does not sound full and rich the way the Neural stuff does, or even the way the actual cab mic'd up does. And ultimately, that was the deal breaker, because I'm a metal guitar player, and I just could not get a good metal tone out of the thing. Not for rhythm, not for lead. Man, the thing was just very disappointing. So for the rest of my processing, as you can tell, the tone ends up getting rather dark when you're doing this degree of subtractive EQ. So what we need to do is basically brighten everything up a little bit, and that's what the second round of EQ basically does right here. And I happen to be running a virtual channel on it for the analog goodness. This is one of those moves that I think if I play this in solo versus in the context of the mix, it can be hard to really hear it. And then, man, in the mix, it like just brings the guitar forward and does everything. And honestly, I think that's another one of my beefs with someone like Glenn Fricker. I think a lot of his ABs do not take something like that into consideration. He likes to boil everything down and just like, I don't know, Glenn Beckett and just shout and be irritating and just blast over all of the nuance that really makes a big difference in the context of a mix. And I know he knows that, because he mixes. So let me show you what that sounds like. I'll do solo, and I will do in the context of the mix. So here's the Neural just on its own. So here it is with it off, and then back on. And then here it is in the context of the full mix. So off and on. This EQ just brings the guitar up, you know. Man, it just does that last little bit of fine tuning that I think in the context of the mix, it is way more apparent than when it's in solo, which is why honestly, when you do like any of these sort of moves, you should not be doing it in solo. You should be doing it with the context of the full mix. And this is another example of that. So dynamic EQ to just control the palm mutes. When you palm mute on the guitar, you get a build up a low frequency. If you use a dynamic EQ, it can basically, it's an EQ connected to a compressor. It'll set down and it'll help control that buildup of bass. And arguably, I've got this set too aggressive. I think it is cutting a little too much in certain palm mutes, but you get the idea. So with all of that combined, now we've got a tone that is again mix ready and ready to go. And that's the process for each one of these, right? We bring in some sort of a dynamic EQ, and we bring in some sort of a secondary EQ to basically be the finishing polish. And these are not all exactly the same. I mixed one individually so that we could hear it again in the context of the full mix. That's like my goal here with all of this. Let's jump over and take a look at the lead guitar real quick. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the leads. Basically, all of the processing, the EQs are bypassed here, and we'll hear each one in solo briefly. So I think those trends continue, right? Like I think the Two Notes is just laughably bad. I think the head into the Neural sounds pretty terrible, and then just straight Neural and just straight cab sounds pretty good. But with the processing all on, I think at the end of the day, what was best was the head into the Neural DSP cab. I think that ultimately wound up sounding the best. So let's hear that in the context of the full mix. So thank you for watching. I found that to be very interesting. In the end, I think undoubtedly my favorite combination was the Mesa head running into the Neural cab. As anybody who's tried to mic up a real cab knows, it's really, really hard to do. So to have sort of the analog meets digital flexibility of the cab, I found to be the coolest one, and I think the best sounding example in the end. I think the Two Notes cab is pretty much complete trash, and that's why that was not working for me. It did not have the flexibility I needed to teach my virtual lessons, and honestly, it just didn't sound good to me. And I mean, I think the Mesa plugin, I mean, what do you even say? You know, it's a $100 plugin that sounds, you know, I don't know, 8/10 as good as, you know, or 9/10 as good as the real thing. You know, Neural stuff always just blows my mind with how good the stuff sounds. And for that price point, I mean, it's basically like a decent MXR pedal, you know, and you're getting a whole amp, a whole cab, the delay, the reverb, overdrive, like all the stuff you're getting there, you know, is just absolutely incredible. So those are my opinions. I'd love to know down below what you guys all thought. Thank you for watching this video. If you dug it, you know, hit like and subscribe, all that good stuff. I appreciate it. If you're feeling frisky, hit the bell. That'd be kind of crazy. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one. Woo!